sending out an email to you tomorrow with the link, so you'll be able to view it. So I think that's all the housekeeping that's taken care of. So Michelle, I'm going to give it over to you.
Okay, great. Am I unmuted now? Just wanted to make sure before I start talking.
I can hear you perfectly.
Great, very good. Well, thanks for the introduction, Rebecca, and it's nice to see some familiar names on the attendees list. So I will try not to be nervous because of seeing those familiar names. But I'm glad to be doing this tonight, and I'm excited to hear from all of you about your caregiving experiences and how you're managing those experiences in this interesting time that we're in. So thanks, Rebecca, for inviting me to do this, and I look forward to sharing my story and hearing all of yours. So I guess we can go to the first slide. Okay.
Michelle, did you want me to advance or?
Sure, that would be great. Sorry about that.
No problem.
All right.
Hey everyone, it's the initial first time doing this as we learn our new system. There we go.
Thank you. Okay, so this quote is, I think, a great way to summarize the importance of self-care when you talk about caregiving, and we're going to break down those two concepts throughout the presentation, but this is a great way to lay the foundation. Taking care of yourself doesn't mean me first, it means me too. And a lot of caregiving related websites, brochures, books, etc., do talk a lot about putting the oxygen mask on yourself first. So this is sort of that concept because it's critical to caregiving. So just keep these words in mind as we move forward. Next slide. Okay, so a little bit about me. I graduated from Eastern when it was still Eastern College, although it was right at the time that it gained university status. So we had the option of having Eastern University on our diplomas. It was May 2001. I graduated with a BA in English writing. And then I did my, where I had my first job at a local nursing home where I did my service learning hours, INST 150, as it was called then. Not sure if that's still the name now. But I did go right from graduation into working at a local nursing home. And I did marry fellow Eastern alum, Joshua Seitzer, who also graduated in 2001. We met on the set of Fiddler on the Roof that Eastern did, and Joe Modica, who I think might still be in the audience, was in the cast with us, and we have wonderful memories of that experience. We also adopted a daughter from Bulgaria in 2013. She was 2 years old at the time, and she's 9 years old now. And we live in Macungie, Pennsylvania, just moved here in the fall. So that's a little bit about my background. And my company is Caregiving Advice. And I've been a freelance writer since 2008, using that English degree, and worked for the Alzheimer's Association as well. But last year, I decided to officially launch Caregiving Advice in a more formal capacity to serve as a resource hub for caregivers of all ages needing resources, advice, and hope. And that is what we're all about. And my entire team is made up of Eastern alumni and graduates. So I'm really excited to be presenting tonight because I'm very much embedded in Eastern alumni every day, and they make up my team. So I'm proud of all of the work that they are doing for our site. Next. So my caregiving story, the little picture there is a snapshot of me holding my daughter's hand before she went in for the last surgery that she had, which was in February of 2019. She has had a surgery every year that she's been with our family. And we weren't entirely expecting that. We knew she had special needs, but didn't know that we would be going through that many surgeries. But nonetheless, this picture is from that most recent one. But I really kind of feel like I've been a caregiver most of my life. I'm the oldest of 5 girls. So I was always changing a diaper or chasing someone around or helping someone with their homework. And then I did a lot of babysitting in our neighborhood and then started working with older adults. I had wonderful relationships with my grandparents, and that really inspired me to work with seniors in a variety of settings. So I was a personal care aide, which meant I was assisting with bathing, dressing, feeding, bringing people to activities. And then my first job after graduating from Eastern was an activities director. So I got to play bingo and trivia, do chair exercises, and all kinds of fun things like that. And then the advocacy coordinator position was with the Alzheimer's Association. And in that role, I worked mostly with family caregivers to advocate on behalf of their loved ones for more resources and support from our state legislature. So that was an interesting experience and a different angle on caregiving and working with caregivers. And then both of my grandparents, who have since passed away, one had multiple strokes and the other had Lewy body dementia, which is a type of dementia characterized by Parkinson's-like symptoms. And so I did help my family with a lot of their care before they passed. And then, of course, my role as my daughter's caregiver and parent and all of her special needs, which is the role I'm taking on today. So that's a little bit about my caregiving story. So I'll go to the next slide. So because of all of these caregiving experiences, my self-care story should have been woven throughout, but I think really until I became a parent and was doing caregiving around the clock with my daughter, I started to learn the importance of self-care and really got a better sense of what caregiver burnout meant. This quote here is from the doctor that I saw 2 years ago when I was, or about 2 years ago, when I was probably at my lowest point with caregiver fatigue and burnout and depression. She said, "It took you months to get here. It will probably take months to recover." Not something that you want to hear, especially when you're a type A like me and you want to just keep going and pushing through and, oh, I just need some extra rest and then I can keep going. But that wasn't the case. So these links, you can check them out later if you want, or I can put them, maybe we could put them in the chat window too. But I did write stories about my experiences with both caregiver fatigue and caregiver depression. And the picture here is from a session with my therapist, and she did a little sketch of a flowering cactus, and that we can talk a little bit more about later. But one of the things that I've been working through in counseling is learning how to accept both the beauty and the pain of our life experiences. And so that was a representation of kind of living in the midst of both. So you can go to the next slide.
And just to let everyone know, I did put that in the chat window, one of the story links for everyone to read later.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Everything okay? Do you want me to see if it'll click my way?
Oh. There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, so this is a good point to start hearing from some of you, if that's okay with you, Rebecca, or we can do it by the chat window. But what do we think of when we think of what is caregiving? I mean, it's a pretty broad thing. It's a broad definite. There's many definitions of caregiving. Oh, are we there? Oh. I'm sorry. Who are today's caregivers and what's your caregiving story? So Rebecca, what would be the best way to have this open discussion?
Well, we have the chat window if people want to use that, or if they just want to put
Yeah.
some comments into the Q&A.
Okay. Yeah, that would be
Easiest
great.
for them, or if they can think about it and put it in for us to revisit after the presentation.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, great. So if anyone wants to use the chat window or probably the Q&A, so we can, teachers are caregivers from Jean McFeeters. So that's one thought about, some of today's caregivers. So if you want to use the chat or the Q&A, we'll kind of update as we go along.
Perfect. So I think for a lot of people, they may not think of themselves as a caregiver if they're not doing hands-on care. I've found that in the work that I've done. Oh, well, I just, I do mom's laundry once in a while, or I pick up groceries for my grandmother. I'm not really a caregiver. I'm not, giving her meds or taking her to the doctor. But the reality is, if anyone depends on you for some type of care, you are a caregiver in some capacity. Now, of course, there's different levels of caregiving, but as Jean said, teachers are caregivers, and that's certainly true. Students depend on their teachers for guidance, for nurturing, for a variety of things. So caregiving is really broad, and anytime you are caring about somebody else or giving care in whatever way you are doing it, it's something of yourself that you are giving. It's embedded in the word. You're giving care. So it's important when you're thinking of your caregiving story and your caregiving roles that you hold in your family and your circle of friends. Maybe in your circle of friends, you're like the one that everybody goes to for advice. These are all different aspects of caregiving. And we have to factor the toll that takes on us, factor the emotional weight of it, factor the physical aspects of it. If you're literally doing heavy lifting, taking care of somebody who requires physical exertion, and then of course when you're thinking of somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia or any kind of emotional, behavioral, or mental health challenges, it may not be as physical, but it's emotionally taxing. So really there's a wide range of caregiving experiences, and there's caregivers of all ages. There's children who are responsible for the care of their parents, and that's a growing number of the caregiving population today, and a lot of millennials who are taking care of their grandparents. I have a few of them on my team. So we really have to think very broadly when we think of caregivers and caregiving. It's not limited to elder care, although that is a huge portion of today's caregiving population. So thank you for all your comments. I'll definitely be responding to those. Caregiving for church members, I love that. Thank you, Lauren, for that. And Nancy, yes, we're definitely talking, we'll definitely talk about getting a break and how important that is. Wife and family, social worker, yes. Any context. Love it. I love all these comments, so thank you for that. If that's having trouble loading, Rebecca, we can certainly just move forward. I don't want to hold up on the presentation.
I think we should move forward.
That's fine. So this is a video. It's available on my website and on my YouTube channel. One of our team members created about her grandparents' caregiving story and what she learned from that. But we can move forward on that for now. So self-care, what does self-care actually mean? And people do, I think, get nervous when they hear self-care, especially when you consider yourself a caregiver. Caregivers are often very selfless people, and so they don't necessarily want to think about themselves. They're thinking about someone else. But and self-care is a buzzword that's trending everywhere, especially now. I know I'm super tuned into it because of the work I do, but I do think it's really getting a lot more play in on social media and in conversations today. But it's important to know that self-care isn't selfish. But what does that really mean? Well, self-care is prioritizing your needs, listening to your body, mind, and soul, and self-care is defined by you. So you may not think going to the spa qualifies as self-care, but maybe it does. But there's so much more to it than just a one-time event. And I know for me, when I was learning to do self-care better, I really thought I was okay by just getting a massage once every couple of months. And my wonderful therapist told me otherwise. So it's important when you think of self-care to kind of break down that barrier in your mind of this is selfish. It's not something I should be doing. I'm not a priority here. You know, people are depending on me. Because people are depending on you, it is important that you take care of yourself so you can be able to better meet their needs. So it's not self-indulgence, of course, and nor is it self-love or self-centeredness. I feel that those words sort of have a negative connotation, and while you want to focus on yourself to do better self-care, we want to think of it in a more positive way and not as self-centeredness. So are there any questions about that? Definitely at any point, if you have questions or want me to go review something, pop it in the chat. But the important thing to remember here is self-care is not selfish. So this short little video, just to get you thinking about the basic, it's an analogy that's used often in caregiving, filling your gas tank. Imagine if you were the caregiver and you just kept driving and driving and you never stopped for gas, you never tuned up your car, you never took it through the car wash, never unloaded groceries that you put in there. Just think of all of the ways that you as the caregiver are driving the bus every day. Are you taking care of that? Are you taking care of the bus? Are you taking care of your body? This is a quote from one of my pieces. I had no margins in my life. I had used up my reserves. I had reached my rock bottom. And so I really was just pushing and pushing. I wasn't refueling in any way. I wasn't maintaining, and it caught up to me, just as it would for a vehicle or anything else that requires maintenance. Ironically, one of my favorite places to do self-care is a car wash. I've always enjoyed going to the car wash and having a clean car, but also just kind of sitting in there and watching the bubbles and the soap and everything just kind of swish around. It just gives me a feeling of peace and joy. And sometimes I have gone in there, and while everything's swirling and swishing, I just scream or cry or whatever it is I need to do in the moment. So it's important to think about different ways that you can give yourself the care that you need to keep going. Go ahead, Rebecca. Sorry about that. So here are 6 easy and free ways to practice self-care daily. Again, we talked about, or I mentioned, going to the spa, and that seems to be kind of the classic thing that comes to mind when you think of self-care. And I see your comment, Nancy, about self-care seeming selfish, especially for Christians. And that's definitely something I struggled with and wrestled with in many of my sessions with my therapist, to really get over that that thought that's so ingrained in there for Christians, that thinking of yourself or doing self-care, it just doesn't feel natural, especially when you've been a caregiver for so long. And it isn't something that as Christians we maybe talk enough about. So, but we'll move forward now on some of the easy ways that you can do self-care. And these also, I credited Eliza Brown, who's one of our team members, and she cares for her grandmother who has Alzheimer's, and she and I have worked on some tips in the last couple of weeks, kind of adjusting the opportunities that we have for self-care, given the the quarantine and the stay home restrictions. So these are all have all been designed to fit our new normal that we're in today. So the first one is how. Oh yes, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. We have the poll, so as you read through it, I'm going to release the poll, and people can answer and see which one they'll choose.
Very good. Thank you. Oh, I'm looking at some of the work here. Great. Yeah. So there's 3 challenges there for you. These sound simple, right? But when it comes down to it, how often do we do these simple things? So we tend to, and I'm guilty of it too. I mean, this morning I had an article due for a client at 9 a.m. and I just got up and went right to it. Didn't do any of the things that I recommended here as challenges. So it's definitely something that you need to be intentional about, definitely something that takes practice, especially if you aren't used to doing something for yourself first thing in the morning or any time in the morning. And before you know it, the day gets away from you and you are more and more depleted. So think of trying any of these challenges or anything else that would speak to you if it's not on the list. Make your bed, wash your face, and drink some water, all before ingesting any news. And then challenge 1, eat a full breakfast while seated at the table without your phone or to-do list. For me, not having the to-do list nearby is a big challenge. Challenge number 2, go for a run or a brisk walk in nature. And challenge 3, set a timer and sit in silence for 5 minutes before launching into your day. Just be. And that one came from the first therapist that I saw, who really got the sense for me that I was very much a doer to the extreme. And she really encouraged me to practice this intentional sitting and be. She said, "You are a human being, not a human doing." And that really hit home to me, but it was something that I struggled to do. And if you don't take time to sit for a few minutes in silence, this is a challenging one. I mean, you'll set that timer, and keeping your mind from wandering to all the things you want to do or all the people waiting for you and waiting on you, 5 minutes can feel like a really long time. So thank you for sharing, Jessica Watson, all 3, that's great. Yeah, any one of these, or like I said, anything that speaks to you. You might have a different idea of what would be a good way to start your morning, help you feel more fueled up for the day. Go ahead, Rebecca.
I was just going to say, and it is a poll, so everyone, please feel free to vote so we can share. We're trying to be a little bit interactive, so I see people are viewing the question, but no one's voting yet. So if anyone wants to choose which one you might want to try.
Okay, I saw that somebody said all 3, so.
In the chat, but I'm sorry, everyone, we're just trying to learn the new system, but there is a poll, so you should be able to.
I see, and I'm seeing now too, the Q&A versus the chat window. So that's good to see. Okay.
Oh, excuse me, sorry. So you'll see the poll results. We have a few more coming up. So if you just want to vote, we can share it. So we'll see what everyone's kind of choosing in the poll. I'll move on to the next one.
Okay. All right. Okay. So this one is especially important for right now, as many of us are homebound. Keep your living space neat but cozy. You're currently spending 100% of your time here. Make it enjoyable. So there's different ways you can do this: fresh flowers, cozy pillows and blankets, photos of friends and family, and clutter-free corners. For me, that's a big one. I tend to feel more scattered when things are scattered around the house, but then there are times when the reality of life and kids and family being home that aren't normally at home all day, every day, do make that a challenge. So we certainly don't want this to be something that makes you feel an extra level of pressure or something extra on your to-do list. But it's more the idea of having a space, even if it's just one little area of the house that's kind of carved out for your enjoyment, a place that brings you peace and stillness in the midst of the chaos that we're all feeling in our various caregiving situations these days. So I go to the next one. Communicate, but don't drain your well. And this has been a big one for me, and I'm wondering if anybody else would agree. You could raise your hand maybe in the chat box, or but there are so many FaceTime calls, Zoom chats, what we're doing right now, that are great alternatives for in-person gathering. But for some of us, all of these back-to-back calls and communication, different forms of communication can feel overwhelming. So if it comes to a point where you're just feeling like, I can't do another Zoom chat, or I can't, I want to check in with my friends and family, but I'm just spent from whatever it was you're doing that day, from your caregiver, from the needs of the person you're caring for. Sometimes you just have to call it a day. My sister and I sometimes text back and forth because we say we're talked out. So we just kind of check in by text. There's different ways to do it, but sometimes you just need to step away from the inbox or the voicemail or the text chats, because it's taking something from you when you're doing that. Now, of course, there are people that fill you up and encourage you that way, and certainly take advantage of those connections as they come. But if you are feeling really drained by all the communication, definitely be sensitive to that and give yourself a break. We can go to the next one. Accomplish something. Finish something on your to-do list and be proud of your work, even if it's just drinking a full glass of water in one sitting. And I'm laughing because I don't know if I remember the last time I did that. So sometimes the most basic things, like drinking enough water and getting enough rest, are really the hardest to do when we have this mindset of have to keep pushing, have to keep caring, just have to keep going. But one of my favorite things to do I have not had a dishwasher in the home I've lived in since I was a senior in college at Eastern. And this new home, we have a dishwasher, and it's one of my favorite things to do, loading it and unloading it in the morning. I feel like I've accomplished something. If nothing else happens that day, I emptied the dishwasher and I have clean dishes, and it happened overnight while I was sleeping. But I think when you have a lot of responsibilities as a caregiver, and as a person, even those little things, those little accomplishments really go a long way. We'll go to the next one. Okay, so fill your feed with funny, adorable, joy-sparking things. I don't know if you all know who Jack Black is, but he is an actor, comedian, and that is his quarantine dance. If you didn't see it on Instagram or on social media, that's in the first circle there. But he makes me laugh all the time, and so I've been more intentional about what I'm looking at when I am scrolling through social media. The little girl looking at her Barbie doll in a wheelchair. My daughter has the same Barbie doll. And her little face just lights up in the video when her mom says, "Oh, does that doll look like you?" And she just gets the cutest little grin. And then the last one is a picture of a jeweler who makes her creations out of old antique tins. And I think her work is beautiful. And whenever I see any of these types of things in my feed, it makes me feel lighter. It gives me that sense of joy that can sometimes be missing when you're facing caregiving challenges throughout the day. So if you do take time to sit and scroll, nothing wrong with that. Be mindful of how much time you're doing that, but also be mindful of what you're viewing and taking in, because it could be taking a toll instead of giving something back to you. Okay, so drink more hot beverages. Now, the weather is getting warmer, so I'm not sure if everybody enjoys a hot beverage in the warmer weather, but I'm not actually a coffee drinker. I love the smell of it. I just don't love the taste, so I love tea. But having a cup of tea has been a really important self-care ritual for me since becoming a parent, because you really have to slow down to enjoy a hot beverage. So pick a time of day when you need a pick-me-up or a pause. For me, that tends to be in the afternoon, like around 3 o'clock, right before my daughter goes into what we call her bewitching hours, between 4 and 6. And for those who might be caring for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia, those are the hours for sundowning. And that is a phenomena among people who have Alzheimer's, where they have an increased sense of anxiety and agitation around that transitional time of day, from day into night. And that can be a really, really difficult time for people with cognitive impairments and memory loss, and consequently a hard time for the caregiver. So I need that slowdown. I need that pause to gear up for that second half of the day. So if you can see the poll, we're just wanted to ask you what your favorite hot drink is. I like chai, but I like my chai iced. But when it comes to something hot, I go for tea. So, and try to sit in a place that's calming and inspiring. And use a favorite mug. I definitely have a couple of favorite mugs, and I have them in a secret cabinet so that when people come to visit, like my in-laws, they don't use my favorite mugs, because there's been times that they have, and I tried not to get upset about it, but there's something about your favorite mug. Just being honest here. But taking time to slow down, and just the ritual of preparing a hot drink can be a chance for you to slow your brain and your body down. Did we get any poll results, Rebecca?
We did, so I'm going to just end the poll real quick and show what everyone has said.
Okay.
So it looks like the biggest one was coffee, followed closely by tea. I included warm milk because I've been recently making some warm milk with like some nutmeg and cinnamon, so kind of making my own little chai without the caffeine for when I need to fall asleep, since all our sleep cycles are all thrown off from all this.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, that sounds good, actually. Good one. How are we doing on time, Rebecca? I wanted to just check in and see.
Yeah, I think just in the interest of time, we're at 7:42. So if we want to get through the next slides and then revisit some of the Q&A or chat, so we can talk a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely want to leave time for that, so we can kind of just breeze through the last few.
All right, great.
So this is a good chance to do some discussion, and I think this was one of the questions that was in the Q&A. How do you know when you're getting to that point of burnout? Are you able to see the signs? And a lot of times the toll of caregiving can sneak up on you, and you really don't, and you may not be aware that it's happening until you kind of get to that point where you can't go back. You have your body tells you to stop. And I definitely found myself there many times. So what are some of the signs of burnout? Do we want to take some of the questions, or how do you want to do it, Rebecca? Should we unmute people, or is it just best to address the
Well,
questions in the chat
this
box?
is going to be a mute, so it's just going to be chat and
Okay, perfect.
Q&A. So if people just want to use the, I think everyone seems a little bit more comfortable with the chat right now. So if people just want to chat and, let us know some signs where, they kind of feel what they're, hitting the burnout stage. I know someone said they're not really good at self-assessing. So
Yes.
maybe if you want to point out things to look out for as well.
Yeah. So for me, during the years that I worked in nursing homes and retirement communities, I loved working with the older adults. But for me, as an introvert, the burnout would sneak up on me because I enjoyed their company so much. But then when I realized that I am, engaging with people in a very social way for 8+ hours a day, I wasn't balancing that out very well when I wasn't working. And so I knew when I was hitting a point of burnout, when I felt like I wanted to snap at any of the residents, like kind of just had less patience. I never would think that I'd want to snap at any of them, but if somebody came and asked me a question for the 15th time, if I felt that kind of urge to say, "Oh, I answered that a million times," then I knew that my well was dry. It was really time to step back and get some rest and new perspective. So I try to be aware of that with my daughter now. Yeah, and I see somebody saying that. Oh, Sandra. Hi, Sandra. I know when I'm burnt out, I get snippy or sarcastic and most times shut down. And that is definitely a big sign too, is shutting down, kind of feeling like you just want to isolate. That is definitely a sure sign. Now there's types of isolation that are okay. It's good to separate yourself sometimes and give yourself that time that you need to rest and refuel and refocus. But if you just kind of shut down and are feeling sort of flat emotionally, that is another good sign of burnout. And I definitely experienced that more than once in my life, where I just was numb, just emotionally tapped out. I wasn't sad, I wasn't mad, I wasn't happy. I was just kind of functioning. I was just kind of very apathetic. So those are some of the signs. Talking about the patience bucket being empty, good one. Numbness, good one. Yeah. When I realize I don't care about the results of what I'm doing, that's the time to step away for a moment. Absolutely. Yeah. When you lose sight of, who you're caring for and why, I know teachers experience this burnout, especially close to the end of the year, although this is a different end of the school year for so many teachers. But living with a teacher, being married to a teacher, I definitely know when he's feeling burned out or needs to take a break. And actually, come to think of it, when he was a high school teacher, every year he would get sick over Christmas break, because that's when he would actually stop and let his body rest. And all of the times that he had just pushed ahead instead of taking a few minutes break or a day's break, caught up to him. So that's an important one. Comparing, I see in the Q&A, tips on not comparing. Hearing people complain about household chores or daily things when you're dealing with someone's lives in your hand, that's huge. And that was a big one for me. As an adoptive parent, I was part of many different online support groups, and these parents were talking about, their kids' needs. And I thought, wow, it can go either way on that. There were times that I would look at somebody else's situation and think, that's so much worse than mine. Their situation is so much worse than mine. I should just get myself together and I shouldn't be complaining so much. And then there's the other side of it, where I'd see somebody commenting about something simple like daily chores. And I had just spent the night, giving her medicine every 3 hours and not sleeping. And that would frustrate me as well. So that kind of goes back to the mindfulness in what you're ingesting online, in social media. Is it causing you to feel negatively about yourself or about your situation? or about someone else? And if so, you need to really guard your heart and your mental health around those issues, because it does take a toll on you. Some other signs, of course, are just fatigue, and that's what would happen to me. I would just end up on the couch, unable to move for a good day or so, because I would just get to the end of my reserves, and my body would not let me keep moving. Want to go to the next one, Rebecca?
Yeah.
So practicing self-care preserves health for long-term caregiving. So think about these questions. What's your long-term plan? Who will care for you? If you can't do it, who will? And so when you're feeling that conflict inside, it's selfish for me to want to get away, or, oh, I just, sometimes you might feel like you're doing too much self-care. And if you're really in an intense caregiving situation, there's never too much self-care. You just have to reframe the way you're looking at it. Certainly, if you went to the spa every day and disregarded your caregiving responsibilities, that's a different thing. But none of us who are caregivers would probably do that, right? So you have to think more simply. You have to integrate self-care into every day. Especially if you are caregiving every day, because you need to preserve your own health, because this person or people in some cases depend on you. So when you really think about if something happens to you because you've burned yourself out, not only who will care for you, but who will care for the person that you're responsible for. And that can be a good reality check for some of us who like to just keep burning the midnight oil. So self-care is a necessity, not a luxury. Rosalind Carter says there are 4 types of caregivers: those who are caregivers, those who have been, those who will be, and those who will need caregivers. So at some point in our lives, we'll be touched by caregiving, and probably many of us have been or will continue to be touched by caregiving for a lifetime. So that's another reason why self-care is not something that you'll just get to later. If you don't make it part of your lifestyle, part of a healthy lifestyle, you won't be able to do caregiving for the long haul. So I just want to say this too: if you're experiencing caregiver burnout, fatigue, or depression on any level, reach out today. The person in your care needs you to be at your best, and your own health is valuable.
Michelle?
Yes.
Yeah, we had one question, and just in today's kind of environment, self-care might be a little bit, I don't know if I want to say easier because of the social distancing, but what are some of your suggestions for kind of giving care to others in this distancing time when we can't, give a hug, when it's something that's like virtual? You have any kind of tips for, sharing
Sure.
and caring right now?
Sure. So, I mean, check-ins, texting can be a wonderful thing. For me, sometimes I get overwhelmed by it if I'm getting too many texts in a day, and then I feel like, wow, I got to respond to this and this and this and this. But it's great to have a way to check in with somebody when you think of them. So this is something that I try to practice. If somebody pops into my mind, a friend that I care about, or a friend that I try to check in with on a regular basis, I text them right away. I don't think, well, I'll call her later, because that doesn't always happen, right? So I try to take advantage, and of course in this time too, where we maybe aren't as pressed for time as we would be at a job, in a job setting. If somebody pops into your mind, call them, text them, tell them you're thinking of them, and if you could see them, you'd give them a hug. Sometimes just knowing that someone else is thinking about you, if you've been on the receiving end of that too, where somebody's checking in with you, it kind of gives you the same feeling as a hug. I'm not saying it is the same, but just knowing that somebody is taking time out of their day to check on you is a great way to be caring for others. We actually we went out yesterday and did drive-through, and when we were in the parking lot, eating the food, I thought, well, who's somebody that wouldn't maybe be able to do this? And so we went through the drive-through again, and the guy said, oh, you're just going to make a day of this and keep going around the circle. But we picked up an extra lunch and dropped it off on our neighbor's porch. He lives alone. And there's just little things like that we can do in this time, and others have done for us in this time today. One of our neighbors left freshly baked chocolate chip cookies in a bag in our mailbox with a little note on it. So there's other ways that we can be present for people right now, and I think it forces us to be a little more creative, of course, but there are still ways to make those connections.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So this maybe because I was an English major, I wanted to throw some Shakespeare in there for fun, but I think this is a great quote to picture the way self-care ripples out when you're a caregiver. So how far that little candle throws his beams, so shines a good deed in a weary world. And I think weary is a word that I use a lot to describe how I feel sometimes as a caregiver. And I imagine many of you, and I'm seeing where some of you are struggling in your chat comments and Q&As, and I will get to those if I haven't done it yet. But you can definitely feel weary. Sometimes it's more than just feeling physically tired. You feel weary, you're run down, you're worn out. The weight of the world is on your shoulders. So think of those little bits of self-care that you can do in the course of a day, and how far that can go, how that can kind of make your light shine a little brighter as you continue caring for others around you. And of course, the little things that we can do for others during this time of social distancing really go a long way too, like the cookies in my mailbox. I have to say that really, that was really touching. So, and I think that's the last, yeah. So this is ways you can get in touch with me, learn more about what we do at Caregiving Advice, what we offer. Resources, advice, and hope is what we hope to provide for people that find us, because I know in some of my hardest caregiving times, those are the things that meant the most to me. It wasn't necessarily a great doctor's appointment. It was somebody that just said, I get it. I get what you're going through. I'm here for you. Keep going. You can do this. The hope, that feeling of hope is so important for caregivers, especially when you're in that period of burnout and need to find your way back to balance, I guess. So. Yeah, and I'm seeing that there's quite a few people talking about sort of the concept of sandwich caregiving, where you're caring for parents and children at the same time. And that is definitely a challenge, and why self-care is so necessary, because it's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. So. Yeah, I do hope you'll look us up on all of our different social networks. Send me an email so we can talk more about the challenges that you are facing, and see if we can come up with some creative solutions to help you through those.
Great. And I also want to let everyone know that you and your team are also giving us some, for those, a lot of us who are working from home, some working from home tips to kind of keep ourselves motivated. So, when you follow Michelle and Caregiving Advice on social media, if you haven't already done so, make sure to follow Eastern University Alumni on Instagram and Facebook. We're trying to branch a little bit more into LinkedIn and Twitter. So if you can follow on all of those, we'll have all these tips from Michelle and her team. And we will send out a recording of the webinar. So if you want to rewatch it, have some of those tips and also, have her email and follow up. So Michelle, I wanted to say thank you so much for, taking some time to go over this. I don't know if people are zoomed out already or if this was helpful, but we're getting a lot of thank yous. So hopefully you get a chance to read that wonderful chat. So
Yeah, and I look
thank
forward.
you again.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I hope everybody finds little ways to get some joy and replenishment in these crazy days we're in.
No, I think I'm ready for a cup of tea myself. It's warmer out, but we have the AC on, so
Yeah, maybe sit
tea and
outside
honey.
if it's a little chilly outside, and sit outside while you enjoy that hot tea. But
Mm, wonderful. And again, so any questions for Michelle for follow-up, you can email her at hello@caregivingadvice.com. Any questions or ideas for other events from our office, please make sure to email us at alumni@eastern.edu. We're trying to get ideas together for virtual events that you all want to be a part of. So let us know, and hopefully we'll be seeing everyone in person soon. We'll see how things go.
great.
All right. Thank you again, Michelle, and everyone have a good night, and look in your emails tomorrow for this recording.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you, Michelle. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.